everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. We have a lot of folks joining us today for our very first Industry Voices webinar. I have Kelly Stevens here with me. I am Emily. I am the Designlab Community Manager and Student Advocate. We're going to give everyone about a minute or two, and then we'll get started. But for those who are here, you've been with us through all of our webinars. Yes, Amber, first message. That's so awesome. Yes, this will be recorded. Absolutely. This is always recorded. This will go up on YouTube, all the fun stuff. So everyone kind of beat me to all the logistics. So that's awesome. Say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're from. This will be recorded. Follow us on Instagram, all that fun stuff. It's going to be fun. It's going to be really fun today. Just really quickly, yeah, say hi, share your LinkedIn information in the chat if you'd like. And if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to toss them in the questions tab on the right-hand side. And then what we will do towards the end of the presentation, it's about a 35-minute presentation. We're going to be tackling questions up until the end of the hour, so 11 o'clock Pacific or 2 p.m. Eastern. So yeah, oh my gosh, there's so many people here. This is awesome.
Look at all those messages. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? We're good?
We can hear you.
All right, awesome.
Yay, awesome. Yes, throw your LinkedIn information. We're all about networking here, right? It's the best way to meet people, the best way to kind of get your connections, all that fun stuff. Cool. All right, so yeah, we have a lot of people. This is so
hi,
exciting.
Everyone. Hi, everyone, to all of you.
Oh my goodness. Kelly is joining us from Amsterdam today. So it is the end of her day, beginning of my day. So, you know, in this world of remote working, this is kind of how we have to kind of work around things, but I think it's probably for the best anyway. I think making global connections is really important and also really fun.
It's super cool. I see so many different locations there. So welcome from wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to get started. So like I said, I'm Emily. I'm the community manager and student advocate for Designlab. I am also a UX Academy alumni. So I've been around for quite a while, but I'm very excited to host this first episode of our new Industry Voices series. And like I mentioned, I have Kelly Stevens here today. She is a senior product designer at WeTransfer, and she's currently located in Amsterdam. But I'm going to let her take it away with kind of what we're talking about. If you haven't noticed from the title, it's 7 tips for crafting an effective portfolio. We can all, you know, always use tips on improving. I know I can. It's been a long time since I've updated my portfolio, so I'm sure I'm going to take away a lot from this chat as well. But again, you know, say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're from. Share your LinkedIn. Toss your questions in the questions tab. We'll answer those at the end. And I'm going to hand it over to Kelly, who's going to kick off our lovely presentation.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to hit this button. Sharing my screen. Ooh, look at all those windows. All right, can everybody see the presentation? Yeah?
Yes, we can.
All right, thanks. Well, yes, like was said, this is the title of this presentation today. How to craft an effective portfolio, not necessarily a fancy one or the best one, but an effective one. And I have 7 tips that I hope will help you succeed. So yeah, just so you know a little bit about me, I'm a product designer. I've been living in Amsterdam for the last 3 years or so, but I am American. And yeah, I'm not very good at speaking Dutch. That's my goal for 2021, is to get better at speaking Dutch so I can fit in a little more in the Netherlands. I studied graphic design at Syracuse University. So if you're in New York or in the Northeast, maybe you know it or know somebody who went there. And I've worked at a few companies now over 8 years in the industry. So I started at TripAdvisor as a product design intern, actually. Then I moved out to Seattle and worked for Facebook for a couple of years. And after that, we decided to move to Europe and try a big life change. And so now I'm working at WeTransfer, which, if you're not familiar with it, helps you send giant files instead of relying on email. And just because I can't avoid talking about my favorite dog in the world, I do have a sausage dog, or a dachshund. His name is Pepe, and he's the best. Okay, I wanted to just start off. I mean, since I'm talking about portfolios, you might as well see my portfolio, right? So this one is the first one I ever had. Thank you, Wayback Time Machine. It's missing a little CSS and missing the images. I couldn't recover those because this is from 2013. But you know, it's a portfolio. It's something. It's got a grid view. It's tried and true. But there's a lot of room for improvement, right? When I made this, I was still in college. I think I was trying to get that internship at TripAdvisor. So I was like crossing my fingers that it would work and it would help me get the job. And now this is my latest portfolio. I haven't touched it in a year and a half now, I think. So it's a little out of date, but this is where I'm at these days. And this is one of the case studies that you'll find in it. So portfolios can always change and evolve. And, you know, as you get more experience in the industry, it's kind of good to update them so that it reflects the newest you. So the way I look at portfolios is like your very own little corner of the internet. It's the only place really that you have full control over what people get to see and learn about you. I mean, we all use lots of other services on the internet, but we don't have full control over our data or how things display, and we don't get to make design decisions there necessarily. But with a portfolio, it is entirely yours. So it's really important to make the most of that space because, you know, design and tech are big industries now, and there's a lot of competition. So you have to make your best moves to stand out amongst the crowd, you know. And recruiters, if you are one or know them or have ever talked to one, you know that they look at thousands of portfolios, so many, and they spend way less time looking at them than you think that they do. I've been told that sometimes it's for like 30 seconds or less. You know, you kind of just look at that initial landing page, and if it's not what they're looking for, then they bounce to the next candidate because there are so many candidates. So an effective portfolio can really help you get your foot in the door. And the way I look at it is foot in the door is like that first phone interview. Your portfolio is basically, I won't say the only, because your resume, of course, and your experience are very important as well. But when you're starting out in the industry, your portfolio is the primary way that a recruiter is going to evaluate you. So it will be a yes or a no from them. And so if your portfolio is effective, then you get that interview and you can go on your way to getting a new job. So you don't need to there are lots of things you don't need to do to make a great portfolio. You don't have to be the world's greatest designer or the most talented or whatever, or think of a 100% original design that's never been done before, because that's also just really hard to do these days. The internet it's been around for a couple decades now, and so it's hard to do something that's completely original. You also don't have to show everything that you've ever designed. There's an element of curation that goes into making a portfolio. And finally, you don't have to code the whole site yourself. There are plenty of tools like Webflow, Squarespace, Wix, all of those that make it easy to bypass that. Of course, if you're really good at that, or you enjoy it, or you're trying to become a front-end developer, then by all means. But you don't have to do that to really stand out as a design candidate. So I do also want to say portfolios are subjective. You know, everybody's got their own opinions, and we're not always going to agree. But a couple of things have really shaped my perspective. So like I mentioned, I've been in design for 8 years. I've redesigned my portfolio about 5 times. There were maybe like 3 really significant ones and then a couple of iterations in the middle. I've interviewed at 9 companies, and I don't remember how many I've applied to, but it's a lot. So yeah, done lots of interviews. I also, when I worked at Facebook, I was part of a group that reviewed candidate portfolios and occasionally interviewed candidates. So I got to hear what other people thought about, you know, offering candidates interviews or not based on the portfolios that they had. And then finally, I've just been around for a few years and been part of and heard a lot of chatter. So I've picked up some tips. So first one, design for the job that you want. I mean, portfolios, sometimes you look at a lot of them and you're like, oh, okay, they look generally the same, but they do vary a little bit by design discipline. So if you're going for a job that's very UX focused, or you feel like you are strong in UX and that's what you want to emphasize, then it's really important to have stellar case studies and focus on the user stories and really just dial in on what the benefit is to the user. If you're more focused on UI, then of course you want to fill up your portfolio with eye candy and have gorgeous visuals and wonderful interactions and just make it a piece of art. If you're going to be a front ender, then it's probably important to code some or all of it yourself. And then of course there's the generalist or the product designer, which is how I identify. And it's usually a mix and match of those. It's not like you need to be stellar and 100% awesome at everything, but it's definitely important to kind of plug and play and choose a little bit of each of these to shape your portfolio. So I've got some examples here. I've just kind of pulled out some of these people I know and some of them I don't. So like with Tushar here, I saw that he shared his portfolio on Twitter the other day. Twitter is where I find a lot of these things actually. And I just really like that it's super dense and like visually rich, and there's a lot of fun colors, and I don't have to look for the work at all. It's like right there in my face immediately. I'll zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. I don't even have to scroll to see work. It's already put it right in front of me. And it looks like there are 9 projects here. Oh no, sorry, 6 projects and then a little bit of writing underneath. Then with John, John's a friend of mine, and I know that he has actually a lot more work than this, because he's been a designer for at least 10 years, probably more than that at this point, but he's really carefully curated what he put in his portfolio so that the result is very clean and elegant. And I only see the 3 case studies that he really wants me to see. And then with Alice, Alice was my colleague at Messenger. I should say, yeah, I worked at Facebook, but worked on the Messenger app. And what I like about what she's done is she's really kind of designed for the viewport. So if you look at this, I don't think I can zoom anymore, but if you look at this on a laptop, this gray space fills the full viewport. And then as I scroll, I kind of see, it's almost like I'm reading an article, or yeah, it's very immersive. So I get to focus on one thing at a time. And it starts very personal, which is always nice. So these 3 people are all product designers. That's what they call themselves. And I'm sure you can see some similarities here. Then if we're looking at a slightly different discipline, we've got UX managers, a person who's a head of design, and then someone who's a UX researcher. But the underlying element, I think, is that none of these people are positioning themselves as a product designer or a UI or a visual designer. So they're really focusing on the narrative and the story that they can tell through their work. So Owen, another person I don't know personally, but see him a lot on Twitter, works for Shopify, and he just goes right into what he can do, what his skills are. And then he has a showcase of case studies here, but he's a writer by discipline. And so, of course, every single word is chosen super carefully. And there's no fancy visuals. It's very, very streamlined, but that makes it easy to read. And then Helen is one of my colleagues, or was a former colleague at a company I worked for temporarily here in Amsterdam. And she just starts off right with what her ethos is, like what she believes in. And so I have a crystal clear understanding of, okay, she's going to like take charge and help me, you know, wrangle a narrative together for my product. So I think she's now a head of design, but her background is in strategy and design leadership. That's another really nice drawing that I found on her site that I wanted to share with you. And then Valentina is a service designer and a researcher. And what I wanted to point out about her portfolio that's really interesting is this navigation here. So she's got a lot of these different skills: user research, service design, facilitation, and writing. And she's just got this big immersive grid on the initial view in her portfolio. And if I click one of these, then I filter down so I can see only the case studies that apply to those categories. And then finally, there are just the designers that wow you and win awards and maybe are more on the brand side of things, or are illustrators or art directors. And actually, you might recognize this one because I just saw it recently, I think in the awards. But these are just beautiful. So if that's really your forte, if you are someone who's just really visually inclined or comes from an art background, dial that up in your portfolio because these stand out a lot. Okay, so the takeaway from all of those examples, what I'm trying to point out is that not all portfolios have to look exactly the same, and you should play to your strengths. Which design skills are you best at? Which type of design jobs would you most like to do? Do you want to focus on UX only or on UI only? Do you want to try to be a generalist? Do you want to be more of a strategist and bypass the pixel pushing element of design altogether? That's kind of important to figure out before you start making a portfolio, because then you can tailor the case studies that you choose and the way that you style the page to suit that. And if you're unsure, if you're still studying and you're kind of figuring it out, ask your mentors, ask your peers. I'm sure they'd be happy to share their feedback with you and just talk about what they think you're good at. That's always kind of nice to mirror your skills in someone else. And the work you show in a portfolio is how recruiters are going to view you. So if there's something you're not really proud of and you feel like, I don't have a lot of projects yet, but I feel like I need to put it in my portfolio anyway because I need more projects, consider leaving it out because you only want to show your best work. And if there's something like a skill that you don't enjoy, maybe, I don't know, I don't particularly love dissecting a lot of data, like quantitative data. If that's something that you're not feeling particularly strong at, you don't have to try and show that in your portfolio to say, hey, look at how well-rounded I am. you can just leave it out. It's okay. Recruiters don't need to know that you know how to do everything. They just want to see what you're best at. Okay, so now you've kind of figured out what your strengths are. You figured out how you want to tailor the design of your portfolio, and you need to kind of start with a story. And the scenario I'm imagining in my mind is like, you're going for an interview and you sit down and the interviewer is like, cool, so you worked at this company or you worked on this project. Could you walk me through it? And the goal is like for you to just feel like, of course I can, because I've already done this when I wrote the case studies in my portfolio. So you know it by heart, basically. So choose your projects wisely. Select the ones that let you tell a well-rounded narrative. There might be some projects, there's plenty of projects or things that I've done where I just kind of like did one element or I styled a button or something. And that doesn't really make for a great portfolio project because all you can write is I styled a button and it got more clicks. Try to come up with things that let you talk about how you carried the project from beginning to end or idea to execution. And if you don't have any experience working on a project like that yet, you can set out a challenge for yourself maybe. Yeah, you can totally just make one up. It's much better to show a well-rounded speculative project than something that isn't really broad enough. But before you touch any pixels, write out each project like a case study. Like try to force yourself to stay away from the design and literally just write down how it went. It's kind of a good forcing function exercise. So the stuff that recruiters are looking for in case studies are usually like your role. It's good to clarify if you were the only designer or if you were on a team, because sometimes people will, leave out that information and then it's kind of a question mark like, wow, that's a massive redesign that probably took 100 engineers to build. Why does it sound like this person did it all by themselves? It's good to be super clear because then there's no doubt. Then there's the challenge and the brief. So what exactly were you trying to solve? What was the assignment put before you? Or did you identify an opportunity and what was that opportunity? Then of course there's research, like user research or any data that you leveraged to kind of inform the directions that you went in. Then of course there's the fun, or I consider it the most fun part, the explorations, the solutions that you considered, all the different ways that you could design a feature or a state or an experience. And then of course you have to narrow down. So what was the solution you chose and why? Walk through that. And how did you validate the solution finally? Was it through user testing? Were you working with an engineering team that maybe built an experiment and exposed it only to a small slice of users? That's kind of the full picture that people are looking for with case studies. And it sounds like a lot. It could be a lot. It's careful not to write too much. Like it's important not to write too much because of course you don't want to lose people, but all of those points are super important when hiring managers are trying to evaluate you. And you can kind of space that out in your portfolio too. You don't have to put like a giant dense chunk of text like this. Here I was just trying to write it out without looking at visuals because I would get distracted. But when I put this in my portfolio, I interspersed images and animations between these bits of text. So choose the projects wisely. And if you're early in your career, it's better to show more rather than less in your portfolio. Don't make recruiters look for your stuff. Don't make, it's fun to kind of dream up websites sometimes that just have this big, beautiful splash image on the homepage, and then you click through and you see the work later. But that's one click that the recruiter has to make to find your work, when it's probably better if you don't make them click and they just have to scroll. So put as much as you can on that like initial page. And I want to show you this example here of Michelle. He was an intern at WeTransfer last summer, so I got to know him a little bit while he worked on the Paste product. And I just really like how friendly and approachable the top part of his page is. He tells me a little bit about him right away. Let's see if I can scroll. Yes, I can. Then he talks a little, he shows what clients he's worked with, and right off the bat, he's got big, beautiful thumbnail images of what he's worked on and little blurbs about what the projects were. So I just kind of like the balance and the approachability of this page. And he's got a full-time job now, but he's in his first or second year of experience. So he's put quite a bit of content here. And the distinction I'm trying to make, actually, I'll get to it on the next slide, I suppose, but there are some websites, mine included, that kind of just put links and link out to other places and maybe don't put case studies at all. And I would not recommend doing that when you're early in your career. It's much better to show more so the recruiters get an idea of you and the full picture of you. Much better to show more than less in general. It's always important to get a balance between words and visuals too. I was kind of getting at that with the case study slide. You don't want to have, it's hard to put numbers or percentages on it, but just find the right balance. Try and get a rhythm to the page. Don't overwhelm people with words. But also, it's not great to show a bunch of visuals without any sort of accompanying captions or explanations, because people need to know what they're looking at. And finally, sometimes you have to put work behind passwords. Maybe you've signed an NDA or the company is like really protective of their stuff. But try to avoid doing that unless you really, really, really have to. And if you can't avoid it, then make your password really easy to find, because I've heard from recruiters that, you know, they are really excited about a candidate and they go look at their portfolio and then it's like password and they don't know where the password is and they can't see it. So then that candidate isn't considered. So careful about that. So these are some examples of those like landing, or the, not sure if I said it already, but like a trampoline page or a springboard page, which doesn't actually have any case studies on it, but it's beautiful, you know, and it tells me about this designer. But it just, yeah, there's no case studies here. So I don't know what this person has specifically worked on before. Now, Charles is super active on Twitter and he has a lot of experience, so he can get away with it. But I'm just showing these examples to kind of mention that this is not a good strategy when you're early in your career. Grant is one of my colleagues at WeTransfer, and he's, I think, at least, again, 10 years of experience. So he doesn't necessarily need to walk through every single thing he's ever designed. He can kind of show just nice snapshots here. And Lan is a friend here in Amsterdam. I would just save this for later. This only really works after you have a certain amount of credibility in the industry, either from just doing things that are really noteworthy or working at a well-known company like Booking.com, or just sheer numbers of experience. Doesn't matter what company or whatever. If you've won awards, it's just, once you have enough experience, you could kind of scale it back. But when you're setting out, it's important to really show exactly what you can do to recruiters. Okay, third tip, find inspiration. Go look at designers that you admire. You don't have to, like, again, you don't have to have this super original concept that you think of all by yourself. It's totally okay to go look at other portfolios. Or the way I put it here, it's okay to creep. Like, maybe you already have some ideas in your, a list of people in your mind that you just really admire, these designers. You're like, yep, I want to go look at the portfolios of this person, this person, and this person, because I think they're amazing and I already know them. But when I was starting out, I didn't really have a sense of designers that I admired, maybe because 8 years ago, design and tech was still kind of growing and there just weren't a lot of famous people. I don't know. I just didn't know people when I was starting out. I'm like, maybe graphic designers, maybe like Paula Scher, but that's not exactly the same thing that we do. So if you're looking for inspiration, there's kind of a creepy way you could do this. You could think, okay, what's a company that I would want to work for and that I know has product designers, and then search for that on LinkedIn, excuse me, not Instagram. I just picked Instacart here, and LinkedIn should show you people, should show you designers that work there. And if you go to their profiles, then you can see their contact info. And a lot of these designers will have links there. So then you can find designers who are in the jobs that you would like and see what their portfolios look like, and then kind of design yours to match that. So it's a really interesting way to be like, oh, okay, so this person got that job, and so maybe if I do this, and I can also interview for that job. And then there's just some good sites for general inspiration. Maybe we can find a way to share these links after the chat, I'm not sure, but Landbook is a great one. Cofolios is also really nice. And then this is a new one I just saw like today. I think it's on Product Hunt, but Pfolios. So there are some websites that will curate portfolios too, and you can always look around there. But the idea is to just like fill up your brain like a sponge with ideas. So you can kind of think, oh, okay, I've seen these beautiful, wonderful portfolios, and now I'm gonna like distill all my favorite parts when I design mine. Another hack, steal keywords from job descriptions. This is a little more like job hunty advice, I guess, but if you know that there's, again, a specific company or a specific kind of role that you're really targeting, go read those job descriptions and then like crawl through the language, because recruiters write those listings really carefully. How is that role described? What are the phrases that are used to kind of talk about the jobs? And then just steal that terminology, like use the same exact words. I didn't used to think this was super important, but then after I got hired at Facebook, I was talking to the recruiter who hired me, and she was like, one of the reasons why your resume kind of floated to the top of all the resumes that are out there is that I guess they have some sort of AI that kind of like looks for keywords. And so I had used the phrase like product design a number of times in my resume and on my portfolio. And so that kind of just automatically brought it to the top of the pile, which I thought was super interesting. So just like match. If you're looking for a company, just match the way that they describe the job, and that might help you. Okay, next one. Thanks for letting me take a break. Sweat the details. Let's say that you have designed a beautiful website. You're like, wow, I'm so proud of this. I finally have my case studies up. I have a web page that I'm proud of, and I'm like, good to share it. Make sure that you go back or just go double check that you've added SEO keywords, because search engine indexing is really important, actually. Like, ideally, it would be possible for a recruiter to just Google your name. I mean, the dream is for someone to Google your name and have your website appear in the first slot. That's really hard to do, though, especially if you have a common name. So maybe it's like your name and then design, or your name and UX design, or something like that. But that won't happen unless you add keywords in the SEO section of the platform where you're building your website. Then there's responsiveness, which hopefully is just a given, especially, well, like Webflow makes it pretty easy to do responsiveness. But if it comes down to a candidate, you and another candidate, and your portfolio kind of breaks at a certain size, and then the other candidate has a fully responsive site, then that could be a deal breaker. Also test performance and load times. I've seen a lot of lovely websites and portfolios that have these just awesome transitions, and like they've hacked the scroll, and there's just exciting things happening, but it takes forever to load. I mean, because not everybody has awesome Wi-Fi. And so that can be costly. Again, it's kind of like the patience of the recruiter, It depends if they're enjoying it so much that they have the patience to stay, or if they're like, oh my God, I have to look at 500 other links today and I just don't have time for this, bye. So test that, make sure you're comfortable with how long it takes your page to load. Also, pay attention to color and typography. Even if you're not, considering yourself to be like a visually inclined person, just make some intentional choices, because recruiters can tell when they're looking at a template. Especially, I've seen a lot of portfolios that look like they come from Squarespace, and I'm one of those people that used a template from Squarespace for like 6 years, and it was pretty obvious. But now I think the web has evolved enough, and the design industry has evolved enough that it's important to pick something that has a little bit of personality. So I have this example here from my old colleague Tonio, who I feel like is one of the most talented product designers I've ever worked with. So great. And his portfolio has looked like this for probably 3 years at least. I mean, I've only known him that long, but it's just so evergreen. It's really classic. It's really classy, and I just love it. I feel like it represents him. And finally, make it dead simple to navigate. This kind of relates to that animation transition scroll hacking thing I was talking about before. But if a recruiter can't figure out how to like get around your site or get back to where they wanted to, then that's another reason for them to bounce. Also, think outside the design, box, the way we're imagining what we do. Because recruiters are interested in like other creative hobbies that you have. So if you like to make music, pottery, podcasts, take pictures, write things, like all of that is actually relevant to them. It's not like they're going to go read your entire blog, but it's cool to mention, other interests that you have, especially if they're creative, because it just makes you appear like a more well-rounded person. And also, a lot of these disciplines approach like problem solving in other ways, and so it actually can give a recruiter confidence that you know how to look at a problem from different angles if you have other interests outside design. So this example here is Femke. Don't know her, only know her from Twitter, but she's super active and spends she posts a lot of great YouTube videos helping people in the industry. And her portfolio, even though she works full-time as a product designer at Uber, that's not apparent from this site at all. This is much more tailored to her well-roundedness as a design individual, and she's got links to different things up here. So if that's you, you could totally dial into something like this. Next one, update often, like enough, not all the time, just enough. And what I mean is like, An up-to-date portfolio is an insurance policy for yourself. So just keep it current enough that you feel like, okay, if I'm ever in trouble, if I'm ever looking for work by surprise, or if you just are thinking, it's time for me to move on and I want to look for a new job, you don't want to be thinking, oh God, I have to update my portfolio though in order to do that. Like, you don't want to be stuck. You don't want to be caught in the cold without a portfolio. So just keep it current enough so that you feel good about that, especially because the longer it's been since you last updated it, the more effort it's going to take to catch up. It's kind of like moving. The longer it's been since you moved, the more stuff you have to pack and the bigger a task it is. So my personal recommendation, everyone's got opinions on this, but the way I see it, it's important to do like a lightweight update at least once a year. That could just be updating the company you work for, like some text in your about in your bio, or adding one project. And then look at doing a redesign, like maybe every 2 to 3 years. That's just a phrase I picked. I know people that do it much more frequently. I know people that do it much more infrequently. It's really up to you, but to me, that feels like the right balance to like feeling like I'm okay. I'm in an okay position and I have a portfolio that's passable if I ever need to really use it. There are going to be people who are just like, but I'm so busy. I can't, I don't want to, it's so much work. And that's fair. I mean, if you're happily employed and you're not really looking for work, then there's nothing wrong with leaving your portfolio alone. Like, there's no shame in it. There will be people on design Twitter who try to make you feel bad about it. There's no reason. It's just, it's up to you. You know, if you're good, then you're good. But you should know that there's a little bit of a risk in that, because if your portfolio is up to date, there's a chance that recruiters might find it, you know, passively, or future colleagues at another company might stumble upon it one day and be like, this person's really talented and interesting and I want to work with them. And that's more likely to happen if you have an up-to-date portfolio with your latest work in it. If you leave it out of date, there's more question marks. It's like, do I really know this person if they haven't put anything on their site in 5 years? I don't really know what they're up to lately. So if you are not even necessarily looking for a new job, it's good to have a relatively current portfolio sitting around, because it might generate some leads that you didn't even expect. And I talked about this earlier, but earlier in your career, like, you should be updating more often. You should be showing more and updating it more, because you're learning all the time. You're improving all the time with every project. And you wouldn't want recruiters to judge you based on like old work, would you? You know, I'm thinking about stuff that I made when I started, and I would never want any of you to see it. It's terrible. This included. We all start somewhere, but it's just super important when you're starting out to make sure that your portfolio represents the best and latest version of you as a designer. All right, now you've made a portfolio, and it's time to share it with the world. Really, don't be shy. Share it everywhere. Copy and paste that link. I put pictures of my own social here just because I would feel creepy taking pictures of other people's social accounts. But you can see here, like on Twitter, it's there. On LinkedIn, in the contact info section, it's there. In the about or the description area on LinkedIn, it's also kind of important to put your portfolio there, because I believe SEO picks up on this stuff. And it's just, make it super easy for recruiters to find your portfolio. They don't want to have to search too long. And if they can't find it, then they'll move on to the next candidate. So I've listed a few social platforms here. There's probably other ones that I'm not even thinking of, but anywhere where you have like a somewhat professional presence, don't be shy. Just share it, because then people are more likely to find it. And it's also really important to ask for feedback. I'm not very good about this. I'll make something and then I kind of like put a fence around it. I'm like, nobody judge me. I'm not even sure that I like it. But it's really important to get outside opinions on your stuff, because then you can feel like more grounded and secure, like, yeah, it is a pretty good portfolio. And B, if there's anything you're missing, then you find out about it earlier before a recruiter sees it. And anyway, people love to be asked what they think. So you have wonderful mentors from Designlab. You might know other designers who are in the course, or just have peers or friends that are in design, colleagues at your jobs. Like all those people are ripe for feedback. But then there's also kind of a nice little niche that I've discovered in the last few years in online design groups. So there's this Facebook group called Designers Guild that I'm a part of, that just is like a really high value Facebook group for me. It's open to anyone, so I encourage you all to join. And every month they have a post, an admin puts up a post that's just like Designers Guild portfolio review, and anybody can post a link to their portfolio and what kind of job they're targeting, and then anybody can give feedback. And if you're afraid of comment sections, don't worry, because this is a very strictly moderated group, so you get like really high quality feedback from this. And then there's another group that I'm not necessarily part of, but is run by one of the guys who has a portfolio we saw earlier, Charles Patterson. He runs this design social club on Slack. That could also be another place where you could ask for feedback. And I'm sure there's like lots of other ones that I don't even know about, but online there are plenty of support groups now for aspiring designers. This one isn't necessarily related to making a great portfolio, but it is so important. Always save your files. Always save your files. Make copies. This is a little bit easier now because we have tools like Figma that just like auto sync all the time, and you don't have to save the hard copies of stuff yourself. But whenever you finish a project, or you're getting ready to leave a job, or you just design something really amazing that you couldn't stand to lose, save a copy of that. And here I have like a funny little thing in Figma. This is my corporate, work Figma account. But if I ever wanted to share a file with myself, I could just share it with my personal email. And I encourage you to do the same. Like, just have that insurance policy ready and available to you. Because yesterday's trash is today's treasure. There's this page. I don't even think it's live right now, but I have a page on my website that I've shown in the past, which is just like an archive of old stuff. And this is stuff that I wouldn't have necessarily thought at the time that I would be able to turn into a full case study. And there's other projects that I've done in the past that I thought were like not very good at the time, but now I'm like, that kind of supports the growth that I've had as a designer, and you might want to show it. That's basically what I'm saying. You never know what you're going to want to show years down the road. So just keep everything, and then you have the power to choose and show whatever you want later. Because as a designer, your files are your life's work. Like, that is the output of what you do, aside from live products or live, website links that aren't necessarily file-based. But the files are the evidence, they're the receipts. And you never know when you could lose access to shared files. So just make a habit of backing things up and organizing them well, like being able to find them. You never want to get caught out in the cold. I had a family member who lost their job 2 years ago. He was a front-end developer, and he had done like 3 years of amazing work in AR, VR. Wow, that's embarrassing. VR apps. And he didn't have any of the source files. And when he lost his job, he just was like left out in the cold and didn't even have anything to make a portfolio. So don't let that happen to you. Keep your stuff. Okay, we've made it to the end. I just want to summarize those 7 tips. So design for the job you want. Start with a story. Just think of, how am I going to tell this story to a recruiter, and write it that way. Find some inspiration, get out there, kind of like fill up your brain with eye candy. Then go in and check all the details. Make sure you have SEO in there. Make sure it's responsive. Just sweat those details, because other people will notice. Update it just enough to feel current and secure, so that, if you ever need it, it doesn't feel super out of date. Then share it all over the internet. And as a side note, always save your files, because you never know when you're going to want to add stuff back to that portfolio. You got it. That's it. That's the end. Thank you so much. Are there questions?
We have a lot of questions. Thank you so much for that presentation. I definitely took away a lot. There are a lot of relevant questions in the questions tab. I will say you've probably set the bar for this entire series. So everyone who is going to be doing an Industry Voices webinar in the future is going to have to match the level of everything that's been going on here. So it's been great. All right. So we're going to dive right into questions. Like I said, for everyone who's here, please toss your questions in the questions tab. I'm going to be asking them in the order that they came in, and I'm going to respond with a happy face once we've asked that out loud. So it's my way of checking off that we've asked your question out loud. All right, so we're going to try to fly through this in about 20 minutes. So we may or may not get to everyone's questions, but we will definitely try. All right, are you ready, Kelly?
Yes. Also, thank you to the thanks in the chat. I'm seeing all of them. I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Yeah, so many great questions, all related, and oh my gosh, like there's so much advice I'm sure that could be given. All right, so we're gonna get started. So this one's actually about putting a picture in your portfolio. So Imad is asking, do I put a picture in my portfolio? I know it's putting a picture in your resume is wrong, but what about a portfolio?
Well, if you're comfortable with it and you want to, I say go for it. I had a picture of myself on the about page of my portfolio for several years, and then at some point, I actually don't have an about page anymore. I just kind of have that blurb at the top of the page. But if you're building a whole separate page, yeah, it's nice for recruiters to see you and get a sense of you.
And I have a picture of myself and my dog, but it's primarily to showcase my dog.
Also dogs.
Yeah.
I'm pro dog.
All right, next question. This one's actually about your portfolio. Melissa's asking, or I like your your new portfolio typeface. Can I ask what it is?
I think it's called Urbane. I think.
Okay. Possibly Urbane, and I will type that into your response, Melissa.
Thanks.
All right. This one's from Dom. And you did touch on this, I believe, on the fourth point, but maybe we can reiterate a little bit more. Is showing your other interests / unique artistic style immediately on your portfolio appropriate?
I like the word immediately there. It really depends what your purpose of having a portfolio in the first place is. Now, with this presentation, I kind of assumed that it was to get a job. So if your goal is to get a job, I would show the work that is most directly relevant to that job first. So if it's a design job, put the design projects there and maybe have like another page or a link at the bottom that shows other areas. But no, I wouldn't put art or hobby related work above design work in the hierarchy on your page.
Makes sense. All right, this one, another one from Imad. Should I show the final visual mock-up of my project at the very top or at the end in chronological order? I'm worried that hiring managers won't have time to scroll to the end to see it, but still worried I'll spoil the surprise if I post it in the beginning. So what's best practice?
I've debated this so many times. I think you're right that probably if you have a long case study and you wait until the very end to show the result, there's a chance that they may not make it there. So I generally try to show, it depends what your layout is and kind of what that homepage view is, if you even show a visual there. But if you have a grid or any sort of visuals on that initial landing page, then you could show like a taste of the final thing there. Maybe not the whole thing. But yeah, generally I do try to put something that represents the final result. Maybe not an extremely detailed screen by screen mock-up, maybe more like an illustration that kind of shows part of the UI in it at the top. So recruiters are like, cool, this is where I'm going to get to. And then they're almost like more willing to go on that journey through your case study because they know where they're going to end up.
That's a great way to put it. It's kind of like when you write an essay, right? You kind of want to have your opening, but then your conclusion kind of like wraps up everything.
Yeah, like don't bury the lead.
All right, related to that question, Echo's asking, in the portfolio, do we need to show every step from the case study or just like key things, key features? Like, I know you mentioned you don't have to put everything in there, but I guess the group is wondering, but how much is too much or how little is too little?
Yeah, it's so hard. You definitely don't have to follow the same process. Like if you feel like you're forcing it, then don't. You can leave out a whole section that maybe doesn't feel relevant to that project. It's actually a good sign if recruiters can see that you've written different case studies and approached problems in different ways. It can actually be a bit of a flag sometimes if you have like the exact same process for every project, because not every project is the same. But it's really hard to say like what exactly the right length is. Just kind of maybe put yourself in their shoes, and be like, if I were reading this, would this feel too long? Yes or no? And go about it that way.
Yep. And I think from your best practice tip earlier, get other people to, have an eye on your portfolio, get their take on it, see if it feels too long for them. Because if it feels too long for another designer, it likely could be too long for a recruiter or hiring manager.
Yeah, true.
Awesome. All right. So next one is from Kevin. And this one's just more about software in general. What's the best software to use if you're aiming to be a visual designer?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would want to know more about what you mean by visual designer. If you mean like UI design, I mean, there are a lot of tools that do similar things now. So I actually used Sketch for a long time, long past the point when Figma became popular, and also XD. I've never used XD before. I've heard it's great. I used Sketch up until about a year ago. And then when I started my new job at WeTransfer, they were like, we use Figma, so can you learn it? And fortunately, they made it very easy to kind of transition from Sketch. But anyway, for visual designers, if you're like going into illustration, I have heard that Illustrator is hard to beat. That's just the classic. That's the most powerful tool, and it's really good to know. But if you're talking more about UI, then I would say Figma or XD or Sketch. They all do pretty much the same thing.
Yep, I concur. Awesome. All right, this was actually about the software that you use for your slideshow. Roberto's asking, what did you use to create your slides?
I get to plug my company. Great. I use Paste. It's actually, even if I didn't work there, I would love Paste. It is the most wonderful thing in the entire world because I didn't design those slides. I just put in my brand. I chose the fonts and I chose the colors, and then like it made the slides. So it's called Paste by WeTransfer. It's great. It's also free.
I feel like, at least in my mind, I'm like, wow, wouldn't that be great to have a portfolio builder where you can just plug things in and it'll just spit something out for you? That'd
yes.
Be nice. All right, so next one is from Dayton. So would you say that there's a minimum number of case studies to show? Do they all have to have the full case study? I think we just kind of covered that. Or can you have like 2 full case studies plus just visuals for another project without a full design thinking written out? And I'm assuming it depends on the project itself, right?
Yeah. I guess I would have at least 2 solid, complete case studies. And I'm totally pro like having other types of work in your portfolio. It doesn't all have to be like a long case study. Maybe you have a couple of those and then you have other work that's more visual. Like that page I showed earlier that was an archive, that's just like shots. It's like dribble shots of stuff. So feel free to, add something like that too. But I guess a minimum like complete number of case studies, I would say 2, ideally 3.
Awesome. All right, this one is probably more of a personal preference question or just kind of setting it up as a personal preference answer. How do I choose between UI and UX, or do I do both, especially if I'm starting out?
Oh, this is so personal.
Yep.
It really depends what you like to do and what you like to do. Speaking personally, I didn't want to ever have to choose. I've actually had a lot of phone interviews where recruiters are like, so which one are you, a UI designer or a UX designer? I'm like, can I choose neither? I prefer to kind of keep my skills broad because you never really know also what design jobs are going to be like in 5-10 years. Like maybe there won't be a split anymore, or maybe we'll all be completely split. Like nobody really knows. So I would actually encourage you to keep your options open as much as possible. But of course, if your gut is telling you, I love UI and that's the only thing I ever want to do, then go for it. Because if you're like a top shelf UI designer who also maybe knows a little bit of motion, those people are like in high demand. So go with what feels right for you.
100%. All right, so we actually got a lot of questions about Twitter since it was mentioned a few times, but we're going to kick it off with this one from Kate. How do you find other designers like you on Twitter?
It's kind of like an avalanche effect that I've seen. So full disclosure, I am not popular on Twitter. I have like not even 300 followers. I hardly ever tweet anything. I'm like a silent ghost. But I do find that there's a lot of interesting conversation that happens there amongst other designers. So I feel like I want to be there and I want to see it and I want to keep a pulse on things that are going on. But I would say just follow a few, like find a way to find a couple of designers initially. And then you may see the tweets that those designers are liking. And then you can be like, oh, cool, what's that account? And then if you think you like that account, then you can follow them. And I've noticed lately that it's like picking up pace for me personally. Like I'm seeing more and more designers that I want to follow and kind of hear what they think about the industry. So it's kind of like you have to get those first few and then you'll find more.
Yep, I can 100% agree with that. It's 100% reflective of your activity on Twitter and not activity on as in you have to post all the time, but like Kelly said, like other people's posts or, just like kind of follow a few people, see who they're liking, whose posts they're liking, and then just kind of start adding it that way. That's really the magic of Twitter, but it does take a little bit of initial work at the beginning.
Yeah.
All right, so this one is from Megana. So what portfolio format do you recommend best? Do you think an offline portfolio with an online supplement is suitable, or should we stick with online only?
Well, I've never had a fully offline portfolio, but if you are someone who has a lot of experience with stuff that's like protected by NDA, or you would have to put a password on your site, that could be an interesting way to handle it. It's like have a very bare bones kind of landing page, and then have an offline portfolio that has a lot more information and that you only send to really serious companies when you're interviewing. So that's kind of interesting. I say do that if you need to. But I would probably lean towards making your portfolio as accessible as possible if you're comfortable with that. So I would go online unless you have a strong reason not to.
Yep, and this is just for my own personal experience. There were a few times where there's just no internet or there's just no way to get to my online portfolio. So I always carry a backup, like a PDF version of my case studies, just in case that I need to be able to access it without access to a computer or whatever it is.
That's a really good tip. Yes, do that.
All right, so this one, so it's actually about passwords, portfolio passwords. So this is from Christine. How would you suggest making your portfolio password easily accessible for recruiters?
Well, I've heard one way to do it is to put the password on the top of your resume or like clearly somewhere on your resume. I think you should do that no matter what. But also I've seen other password kind of like lock screens where it says contact me and then there's like a link to send the person an email or to go to their LinkedIn page. Just make it very easy for the recruiter to then contact you to get that information. Because if they hit a lock screen that's just like, this is locked, the end, then that's a dead end and they probably won't bother trying to find the password.
I guess related to that, and this is just out of my own curiosity, because I do have a few lock projects on my own personal portfolio. Some of those projects are actually, they were under NDA for a while, and it's just things that you can't really show up front. So having a password on your resume that's also easily accessible may not sound like a great idea. So any kind of advice on how to navigate that?
Maybe if you're applying directly to jobs, it could also be something that you share when you send in that application, either via email or if you're filling out a form. Just try to beat them to it. Try to make it. Don't let that situation happen where they're like, "Where's the password?" Just try and get it in front of them before then, by whatever means you feel comfortable doing.
Gotcha. All right. So the next one is from Katie. Would you ever want to put a mock project on your portfolio? Example, it wasn't paid or published work.
Yeah, I definitely did do that when I was in college. And for the first couple of years before I had projects that were real, quote unquote, all projects are real, but like I had a lot of student work on my portfolio for a couple of years. Not all student work, because there was plenty of stuff I made that I would never show the world. But there were a couple of projects that I felt like, yeah, these are nice. These can go on my portfolio. So it's totally okay. And it's often necessary because it's better to show something than nothing.
Yep, totally. All right, this one's from Amber. How should we adjust our portfolio based on where we want to apply? Startups versus agencies versus big companies like Facebook. For example, do those workplaces prefer wordy case studies over brief ones?
Oh, man. I don't feel qualified to answer that because I think it depends on the company and it depends on the recruiter. And I've also never been a recruiter. I'm just kind of going from hearsay. So I think it's just about finding the right balance and feeling what feels right to you. I would not write something that's too long. And actually, if you look at my website, you might think that some of those case studies are pretty long, and I would agree with you. So I think it's probably better not to. No, it's hard to say. I was just about to say, don't do it too much, but you also don't want to underdo it because if there's not enough information, then the recruiter doesn't really know what the project means. So just find a balance. Sorry, that must be frustrating.
All right, next one is from Kara. Any tips or recommendations for starting relationships with recruiters and or getting noticed by recruiters?
Yes, I do have one. It actually helped me get my job at WeTransfer. The way I got my job at WeTransfer is I went on LinkedIn and I searched for recruiter at WeTransfer because I had submitted an application through the website, but I was like, I really want to connect with a person to kind of help them see my application because I didn't know how many applications were coming in. So I found this recruiter, Amy. I connected with her, and in the message I said, "Hey, Amy, I've just applied to a job at WeTransfer. Would you mind if we connect? I'd love to, talk to you." And she accepted like a day later and said, "Yes, oh my God, please, let's talk on the phone." So sometimes that just being bold and direct works. Sometimes it's not going to work, and that's okay. I mean, people are busy, and there have been plenty of times that I try to connect with someone and it leads nowhere. But it's better to try than to be silent and just hope that they see it.
Absolutely. All right, so next one's from Dayton. In regards to your advice to write your portfolio based on the job you're looking at, keywords, etc., how do you recommend doing this when you're applying for like 10 plus jobs a week?
Yeah. Well, then I would scale back to what feels like it represents you. I mean, My first question would be, are you applying to 10 of similar kinds of jobs, or are they like vastly different jobs? And if they're vastly different jobs, you've set a tough job for yourself, because then you have to have one solution, one website that works for all 10 of those jobs. I think I've actually heard of in the past, now this would be a ton of work, but I've heard of people who actually make different versions of their portfolio based on what kind of jobs they're going for. Now, I don't think that's necessary between like UX and UI, but I know I've heard of this. So that's always an option if you feel like I am equally interested in these two different disciplines and I can't choose and I'm just going to take whatever job I get first, then maybe consider having, tailor-made portfolios for each of those paths. But that's a lot of work. So I would try to come up with one website that you feel like ticks enough of the boxes for all of those different jobs, and just hope that works.
All right, so this one is from Kim. Do you recommend including work samples from past career if you've been in different design fields?
Well, depends on the field, but if you're talking about like graphic design or brand design or communication design or research, or I don't know, I can't think of any more, but yeah, I think all of those are relevant, like, because product design or UX design or UI design, it's all so closely related, and all of those different things kind of inform the design of products anyway. So if you're like a really top-notch brand designer, yes, play that up, because most of us are not, and those are just super valuable skills. If it feels related to you, if it feels like that skill would make you a stronger designer, if that's something that pushed you into design, yeah, definitely mention that.
Awesome. So we have kind of 3 related questions from Nathan, Dayton, and Karina, all about portfolio, and I think also from, yep. So base question is, do you recommend any specific software or program to build your portfolio in, like Squarespace, Webflow, all that stuff? And if you choose a builder that probably relies on templates more, like Squarespace, any tips or advice to make your portfolio stand out using a template that doesn't feel like everyone else's portfolios?
Well, I think it depends how much you want to customize the site. So I used Squarespace for, I think, 6 years. I was very happy with it. It was super stable. It never broke. It was just always there, and it didn't have to change anything. And I think I did kind of go into the code injector, if you're familiar with that part of Squarespace, but you can go in and like kind of hackily try to put different animations and things in place. So I tried to customize using animations and also colors and typography. Those are the primary ways I think that you can kind of customize a template. But now I use Webflow, because at some point I got to a point where I'm like, I just have this picture in my head of what I want my portfolio to look like, and I don't know of a template that makes that super easy. So you've seen, it's just a page with some links and some text on it on my portfolio. So I wanted to learn how to use Webflow too, because I'd heard that it was great. And that's where my site is based now. I did think that had a bit of it took me a little while to learn it. It wasn't immediately intuitive to me, but it's worth it if you feel like you have this custom idea that you want to build. It's very like wide open canvas, Webflow.
Awesome. We have time for, I believe, 2 or 3 more questions, and then we're going to wrap up. We do have a lot of questions, so I'm so sorry to everyone that we couldn't get to all of them. But if you have a burning question and you need an answer to, feel free to send us a message on our social channels, or just email us, and we can definitely try to get you those answers. All right, so wrapping up, we're going to go in with Alex's question. Does a more minimal, innovative portfolio stand out more or less than a very trendy modern portfolio that could potentially go out of date faster?
Those two options sound similar. Minimalist, I guess maybe you mean like just, cleaner and light and airy. That's what I'm imagining. And then you're talking about trendy. It's hard to say. I think that the trendier thing could make you stand out more in the short term, but if it doesn't have enough content, like case studies or work itself on it, then that may not do the job for you, because then, it would get immediate attention. But then when the recruiter kind of goes in there to be like, all right, can this person really do the job? If that evidence isn't there, then it may not, it may not get you the result that you're hoping for. If you know how to do that and you have a wild idea and you want to implement it and you have some case studies, like, go for it. I think it's always cool to show personality instead of being like, well, most portfolios are just really light and clean, and I feel like I have to do that. No, you don't have to do that.
All right, so we're going to round off with one more question, and then I'm going to do a wrap up in the chat. But this one's from Cindy. How do you suggest one goes about telling their story when you're a student and you're still learning different processes and understandings of like how these things work together?
Telling your story on the about page, I mean, it's great to be a student and to be learning and to be like impressionable and trying to absorb all the things. Like we people who are hiring, but also recruiters love to see that like the enthusiasm is always awesome. But if you mean like telling a story in a case study and maybe you're a student and don't have a good example of that yet, you can always like set out a challenge for yourself. Think of a product or a service that you really wish could be redesigned, and choose like a gnarly one. Maybe not like redesigning Twitter or something that's been done 800 million times. Do something that like will be a good challenge for you, and then make a mock case study, because that can be just as effective as the real thing.
It's all about presentation and your confidence in speaking to your process.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that was our last question. Thank you so much, Kelly, for your time here today. Like, we do have a bunch more questions, and I'm so sorry again to everyone that we couldn't get to it all. But lots of them were related. So hopefully we did touch on an answer that was relevant to your question. So I did post 2 things in the chat. So thank you all for being here again. Like I said earlier, this presentation today kicks off a series, our Industry Voices series, which we plan to host on a monthly basis. So please keep an eye out on our social channels for when those go live, or when we're going to host one next. I promise it's going to be soon. This is recorded. It will be on our YouTube channel. Subscribe to that channel so that way you can get notified that it's live. And if you want to share it out, even better. But yeah, thank you so much. We had so much fun. Kelly, again, thank you for your time. This presentation was awesome. Yeah, hopefully everyone kind of got some great benefits out of this, and hopefully you had fun, Kelly.
Yeah, I hope so. I definitely did. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm just so happy that you wanted to come and join this, and I hope you learned something.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so we're going to end the webinar here. Again, if you are part of our Designlab community, please, send questions my way, or, if you're not, or if you are even, send out on our social channels. We'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kelly. We'll chat soon.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.